Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Brothers, sisters, viewers of IQRA TV, welcome back with us here in the Bradford studio live on Real Talk. Real Talk, sometimes presented by me, Yusuf Akouri, your host today. Usually it's done by Iqbal Bhai Bana, and unfortunately he's down with a bit of a flu bug. Anyway, more importantly, you're here, we're live, we are here and we're live. And today's guest, subhanAllah, an amazing personality, an amazing person, and an aspirational and somebody for our young uns to look up to. And I say young uns to look up to, that's the way we say it in Yorkshire. Born and bred in Yorkshire. Actually, he says Leeds, but I say Yorkshire. Joining me today is Ikram Butt. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ikram Bhai, how are you?
Wa alaikum assalam, alhamdulillah, and thank you for inviting me on once again.
Jazakallah. Right. We've got Ikram, and Ikram's long story and long career, still young and fresh, looking fantastic, and aspiring many of the young people in this day and age of our global village that we live in. I say global village because we're going to talk about some of his recent work, but let's go back to why I've called Ikram and what's so in it for us in terms of Real Talk. As you know, Real Talk is about real people, real issues, and currently there's these sporting issues. You may have heard currently the Rooney Rule, and also other issues in the FA in terms of the black minority ethnic representation. If you know anything about Ikram, you'll know he was, and he still is, the first Asian rugby player, if I'm not mistaken, to represent England internationally.
That's
correct?
It is.
And subhanAllah, I'm going to ask Ikram from scratch, from day one, how he got into that peak and pinnacle of his career, and what inspired him. So Ikram, tell us a bit about yourself, tell us a bit about your background and where you grew up and what brought you to where you are right now. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah, first and foremost, I was very fortunate to get involved in rugby and the career that I have. I'm very, very lucky by the grace of Almighty, alhamdulillah, and the blessings on my mother. As you mentioned, I grew up, born and bred in the heart of Leeds, literally a stone throw away from the famous Kelly Stadium. That's right, Leeds Rhinos, Leeds Loiners, as they were known then, way back then.
What were they known as, sorry?
Leeds Loiners.
Loiners,
that was their
right,
nickname,
okay.
yeah, and sort of moved into the new age of this new fashion of branding names, which you know I'm in favour of too, and long live Leeds Rhinos. But way back then they were very successful as they are now. You know, they won the League Cup, they won the Challenge Cup, and they had a great history and tradition. And in the schools, that's where I picked up rugby. Rugby league in particular was very prevalent in the schools, and that's where I got my first taste. That said, my father, a true inspirational role model, supported us and encouraged us. And
your father, correct me if I'm wrong, he used to be in the military, and a mechanic, and he used to do
right,
boxing, if I'm not mistaken.
Pakistan Air Force, that's right.
Yes.
So sport was in our genes, myself, my brothers, and my sisters too.
Okay,
my mother, they all enjoyed it. Back in the day when they used to have the wrestling on TV, Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks.
Yes.
My mother was a big fan, so my father, and we all were too.
Okay.
So sport was encouraged in the household, and my father liked his sports, and he encouraged us to take part. So that's where I got my first taste, and I've been playing ever since.
Wow. I mean, sadly, I say sadly, you lost your father at a very young age, and did that give you an even bigger push, or was it something that held you back? And how did that affect you as a young, very young family? I presume, you know, your father, the breadwinner at home, you had other brothers and sisters you've mentioned. How did that hit you?
It was a huge loss, like to any family, myself included. Although when I look back, it took us a while to accept that my father had gone. You know, I was only 11, and the impact didn't hit us. It actually hits us more now, as I'm speaking to you now. When I think of my father, the impact is more now than I was when I was young. Didn't really understand the situation, and then you see the huge gap as the life journey goes on, and we're on this journey now. But it was a huge loss, a true inspiration. Always was there on hand to talk to encourage, to advise us. You know, I mentioned that, you know, to my mother's dismay, when about 6, 7, that in the front room was transformed into a boxing ring. With my father being a boxer, and he just encouraged us. So these things weren't there anymore. The huge father figure of support wasn't there. So we had to make what made ourselves. So actually, it made us more determined. My father taught us the values of respect, character, and the sort of values of working hard. And those are ingredients to success, for sure. Nothing comes without working hard.
I'm going to ask you a question, moving on from your family, and I can see you, you can see it still, and I'm sorry for bringing your father's subject up, because it must have been a struggle and an uphill battle, but you've reached a massive pinnacle. But many would ask, why rugby and not cricket or hockey and the typical Asian sports?
Yeah.
I mean, you must have been one in a million in that sense, doing rugby.
Alhamdulillah. Well, you mentioned those sports. My father encouraged us to play cricket. Not so much hockey, although we did hockey in school.
Yeah.
And other traditional sports that is known to the Asian sort of origin. But you know, prior to being football, my sort of claim to fame, rugby, my claim to fame was football. I was thought I'd become a footballer. I was playing for my school. I was representing my city, Leeds City Boys. A well-known player who went on and actually was successful, David Batty, was in the play for Leeds, Blackburn, and England. Was in the same team at 15. So I was playing football and rugby, and even basketball actually, and cricket too, at school and clubs. But I'm assuming those sports weren't to be, and it was rugby that kept on calling me back, and something that I did enjoy and found more natural than the sports. My father was a big lad. He encouraged us to be physical, and certainly rugby is a physical sport. And it was where I felt more accepted, a sense of belonging, and it certainly was a stepping stone for me to develop my career playing and now off the field. I
mean, you've published a book in 2009, an autobiography, Tries and Prejudice, which sort of ties into my next question. Tries and Prejudice. And I can surely remember growing up watching football, not so much rugby, and I did hear your name popping up in the commentary sometimes, and whilst the football commentary was on. I mean, at that time, we, as the BME community, we wouldn't dream of going to the terraces because of the overt racism at that time. And I can remember John Barnes and players like that who are the BME community, you know, the chants, the noises, the sort of mimicking, the calling, and even some objects thrown from the terraces.
That's right. They will tell you bananas being thrown at them as well as other things.
Yes, and I want to ask you, I mean, was that the case for you? What kind of, I mean, fair enough, at a young age through school and rugby league and going into semi-pro, but when you become professional, it's a whole different ball game. Yeah. And hence your Tries and Prejudice title. Right, so tell us about that and how you can contextualize it in this day and age.
Well, really good question. I mean, the Tries and Prejudice, as you mentioned, tells a story in itself with the and the background to the copy of the book, where there's a mosque behind the scenes and a Pakistani flag. Certainly was a challenge and a struggle, and certainly a journey that we're still on. And you mentioned about some famous names, and one would beg the question that how much has policy changed in sport in regards to discrimination, prejudice, and racism? Surely it's a debate. For me, not a great deal has. There's certainly pockets of good practice that is happening up and down the country for sure at certain clubs. But there's a great deal more work to be done and needs to be done rather than rhetoric saying that we're doing things policies in place. We've seen many policies, projects. You know, rugby league, for example, had a tackle it campaign where they're addressing the issue of more BME representation in the sport at all levels, not just playing, officiating, managing, and just get them to come to watch the game. That seemed to die a death, sort of diluted, and we've sort of gone backwards a little bit, where if we sort of kept the momentum going forward, we might have seen more people from the wider communities. Because initially when you talk about that, without telling my age, you know, the first black players, they used to say, you know, we get more black players on the fields, more will come. And they used to say that's the same example with the Asians, but different dynamics, completely culture, religion, demographics. It's not the same, and I don't think we've done enough reaching out to these communities to get them more involved. So we're, you know, I used to say in time things will progress, but attitudes and mindset doesn't change. So we're still discussing the same type of topics that we were doing 20, 30 years ago. So there's still not a great deal has changed. Trials and Prejudice book was, you know, if I look back, I was a good average player.
Okay.
Others may say different. I wasn't a great player.
Okay.
However, the difference of myself was the fact that I was unique in relation to being Asian, being a Muslim. I say that because initially when I was playing, it was Ikram, but an Asian player. Then 7-7 and 9-11, the flavour changed, or the tune changed. Well, Ikram, but an Asian and a Muslim player. So I was sort of tarnished on both, and I don't have an issue with that because that's why I am. But the perceptions from other people, but also I think people need to be educated about what it's like to be a Muslim, particularly being born in the country, being British, being a Muslim, and being Asian. And I think the book sort of elaborates on some of the things there, and hopefully those people who weren't aware are more aware now, because I've sort of written that in the book.
You've had a vast career, I suppose. Leeds, Featherstone, Huddersfield, Hunslet, London Broncos. You know, you've travelled a fair bit. What would you say was the highest or best in these sort of areas of your pinnacle, or something you enjoyed the most? I won't say your pinnacle, something you enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, as you mentioned, a few clubs there. And initially, when I signed, I was signed as a schoolboy for my hometown Leeds, and that was a huge sort of attribute when I look back on my career. They were a famous club. They had a lot of great players, and one of the great coaches that this country has produced, Peter Fox, was a coach that signed me on. That said, he got sacked after 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I was sort of in limbo when he had gone. But I said limbo, you know, it was a couple of years later that he re-signed me at Featherstone. And when I look back on my career, Featherstone gives me the most fondness of memories. Great club with a great tradition, and we had some great times. You know, we won the League Two. Then we won the Premiership Trophy, playing at Old Trafford, and you know, we talk about miracles. Miracles do happen in this day in life. You know, and I say that it was a miracle that I was did so well and being accepted at Featherstone. It's a small mining town, predominantly white mining, sort of mining town people who never hardly seen any Asians, never mind a player playing for them. But they welcomed me with open hearts. You know, I've got some really good friends to this day. In fact, when I look back at that as the best time throughout my career. And it was at the time I was at Featherstone that I played for England, that I got selected to play for England. So again, one of the sort of final moments of my career playing for England, running out against Wales at Ninian Park during the 1995 European Championships. Then after 5 years of playing at Featherstone, thinking I would stay there forever, the whole game changed overnight. Super League evolved, and that was a competition basically of two media moguls in Australia, Kerry Packer, who owns most of the Channel 9 rights, and then, what's his name? I've got a blank now. who owns Sky TV?
Mr. Murdoch.
Mr. Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch, yeah. So he gave rugby league. We was dying actually.
Yeah.
Sport was dying in rugby league,
Yeah.
and I think he gave us £90 million
Wow.
to switch to his side.
Right.
So the game changed overnight. It became full time.
Do you think that's the reason why you had a lull in BME or Asian players coming in at that time? Or
Well, it's silly. I mean, rugby league's a minority sport. It was back then. Clubs were struggling financially, and then Murdoch came. It was everybody's birthdays all at once. £90 million. We became part timers, full time sports, and it really catapulted us. That said, a lot of the lower clubs got sort of left way behind.
Wow.
Some of the traditional clubs, that Featherstone, for example, who were at the top flight and competing against the top team, but because it was a small mining town village, they weren't put into that category. Which success in so many ways, but then sadness in a lot.
I mean, Ikram, let me, if I may call you Ikram,
Of course.
I'm going to come on to our younger generation now, and we look at some of your initiatives in terms of community cohesion, charitable work, and championing many causes and connecting many communities and doing different things. We'll come to that, I hope, in the next segment, and we can have some more time. But currently, I want to ask you, and maybe some of our viewers can maybe want to phone in and ask you some questions about sport and the challenges they face currently. And I know we're in Bradford right now, and there's loads of youngsters from the BME community who are capable, more than capable, whether it's rugby league or whether it's football, whether it's cricket or whether it's anything else. The challenges are different. For you, the challenges may well have been different. What would you advise to our youngsters right now, if and what they're watching you, and having listened to you, what would you say to them if you were a young teenage boy of 13 to 16? Maybe you still feel that you are.
I do. Within me, it's this shell outside that gives a different look.
What would you do?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you?
We certainly are in a hotbed in West Yorkshire, and Bradford is the hotbed
Yes.
of West Yorkshire for sure. Particularly with the BME, and you break that down, South Asian, you break that down even more, Pakistani.
Yes.
Representation, and we don't see enough coming through the system for sure. We see clubs with lots of young Asian kids playing, but not progressing to the next level, and that certainly needs to be addressed, and it's not. And it starts from clubs, local authorities, governing bodies, and professional clubs. I would say it certainly is a challenge, but don't give in. Do not let somebody else tell you something that. Or somebody else spoil your dreams. You dream big, aspire, work hard, and things are possible. I can only go by my own example. When nobody gave me time of the day, everybody was telling me, you're not going to make it. It's not a sport for you. They don't like Asians. You won't fit in. They were saying all those things, and particularly after I lost my father, I'm thinking, how am I going to sort of, where's my support mechanism? But alhamdulillah, to this day, I still think about my father every single day and what he taught me and what encouraged me to, and that keeps me going, as well as the focus that I want to play sports that I enjoy, and I'm not going to let anybody put a spanner in the works to stop me playing something that I want to do. Certainly, it's not easy. There's ups and downs. There is challenges. I've mentioned throughout my career. From a spectator point of view, people are saying things, throwing things at you. But even from a sort of management and coaching point of view, I had disagreements, which I felt was not so much a disagreement, but it was more to do with my religion, ethnicity. My face didn't fit in because of that. And I challenged that in a way where, at one particular time, I was dropped, actually. It's really funny because I was dropped. I look back on it now, and I was dropped, but the same year, and I had two options, to stay away from club, which I wouldn't advise anybody to do, and just continue coming and training and playing and trying to wait for your next opportunity to get in. And I did that, and I was back in again, and the same year I was playing for England. So I would have expected that from that year, but those things can happen. And I think it was the work ethic and working hard.
Consistency and
Consistency.
keep on
and
at
not,
it.
and not giving in, because when I'm picking a player, now I'm on the other side, I look at character more than talent. Talent is good, but it's certainly not going to get you to the top. People now look at your character, what your makeup is. How can you contribute to the team on and off the field? Are you a player who gets on with everybody else, or you're an individual? There's still positions for those types of individuals, for sure. But overall, it's about character more importantly than me. It's your makeup.
And subsequently in 2004, you're working in Bradford and became the CEO for the British Asian Rugby Association.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that maybe after the break, because we've only got about a minute left before we go on a break. But just want to remind the viewers, it is a live show. They can ask you some questions, especially teenagers.
Super.
However, if time permits, I'll take the calls, because I don't really want to take that many calls, because I've got quite a bit of questions that I need to ask you. And some of the current day stuff, especially in terms of community cohesion, some of the more connecting stuff that you work in, teenagers, charity, as well as the challenges we face on a daily basis, being Asian, being Muslim, whether you're an imam, whether you're a professional rugby player, whether you're a professional cricket player or anybody else. So stay with us, guys. Be with you back shortly after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.